Hey there, and welcome to Cycle Portraits. If you love urban stories, human interest films, or simply need a moment of calm, subscribe us. So, gear up and let's ride.
Today we're tracing the interconnected history and cultural impact of the bicycle across the globe, really. We're looking at Shanghai, Paris, Amsterdam.
We'll be exploring how the bicycle evolved in these quite distinct urban environments.
Yeah.
And uncovering some truly captivating stories, drawing connections between their experiences.
Think of it as piecing together a global puzzle. We'll be looking at academic analyses, personal memories, even like observations from the time the bicycle first showed up. Our mission today is to go beyond just the timeline and really understand how the bicycle reflects and, shapes urban life, societal values, maybe even individual dreams in different cultures and times. It's about how this seemingly simple invention became so deeply intertwined with the fabric of these cities. 1868, Shanghai. The first whispers of the bicycle began. What did those initial encounters actually look like?
It's pretty remarkable to consider the initial bewilderment. These early bicycles as a genuine oddity, almost exclusively ridden by foreigners.
Right.
Imagine the scene, locals encountering these strange machines for the very first time. One account from 1868 describes seeing one wheel in front, one wheel in back. The person uses the tips of their toes on the ground to move it.
Huh. Like a balance bike almost?
Kind of. And another observer noted someone who treads like a steelyard balance, also with front and back wheels, turning like flying. It's that last phrase, turning like flying, that really captures the sense of something new and, well, almost magical.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the mechanics that were puzzling, was it? It was the whole idea of staying upright.
Precisely. Chinese observers at the time noted two wonders: the sheer unfamiliarity of this two-wheeled contraption and the seemingly impossible feat of maintaining balance. It really challenged their understanding of how things moved and, stayed upright.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is that this initial wonder hints at a moment of, cultural reckoning, the arrival of a technology so novel it seemed to defy common sense.
That sense of awe and curiosity is so palpable in the early Chinese poems we found. These little snippets of bamboo style verse a simple, often short form of poetry, you said.
Yeah, common in the region. They're just delightful.
Tell us one.
Okay, so one goes, front and back link two wheels, no need for hands to pull, treading on fragrant dust. It's such a simple observation, yet it conveys this, effortless movement. And another marvels at the speed, saying, front and back, single wheel, foot-pedaled car, like flying, running on level sand, morning after morning, galloping in the slanting sun, the sound rustling, quiet, not noisy. You can almost hear the quiet whir of those early tires on the dirt roads.
Wow. Okay, fast forward a few decades to the late 1890s. The bicycle seems to have really ignited the public's imagination in Shanghai by then.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets really interesting. We see these pivotal events that really propelled the bicycle into the spotlight. There was the Victoria Jubilee bicycle race in the public concession in 1897.
That was the area under foreign administration.
Right, exactly. That race showcased the speed and the competitive thrill of this new invention.
And then later that same year, this incredible story of three British cyclists circumnavigating the globe, actually arriving in Shanghai. That must have been quite something.
It truly was. Imagine the buzz these individuals had journeyed thousands of miles on these machines, demonstrating their potential for long-distance travel in a way that was previously unimaginable for most people.
Yeah, you just wouldn't think of it.
Hundreds of foreigners on bicycles reportedly rode out to greet them, and the Chinese onlookers were just in awe.
This spectacle really hammered home the bicycle's capabilities.
It's no wonder that just a year later, in 1898, the Shenbao newspaper was already predicting that the bicycle would become incredibly popular in China. They clearly saw the potential, didn't they?
They did. However, it's important to remember, as you said, that in these early days, bicycles in Shanghai were expensive imports. They weren't the ubiquitous mode of transport we might think of today. They were very much a luxury item,
Right.
primarily accessible to the wealthy elite and foreign residents.
So it started as a novelty for the few. How did it then begin to sort of take root and spread among the wider population in Shanghai?
Well, the key here is the emergence of bicycle riding as a leisure activity among the Shanghai elite. Places like Zhang Garden, as well as the Every and Foolish Gardens, became fashionable spots where people could learn to ride.
And show off a bit. And, perhaps just importantly, show off their new acquisitions. This shift from mere observation to active participation was really crucial.
And we even have a rather amusing anecdote from around 1898 describing this early enthusiasm. Tell us about the overweight gentleman in Zhang Garden.
Ah, yes. Chen Wuo, in his 10 Delights of Zen Garden, recounts the humorous scene of a rather corpulent man filled with enthusiasm, insisting on trying to ride a bicycle despite his friends warning him.
Uh-oh.
Predictably, he promptly fell off the moment he mounted, bicycle and all. The sheer effort he exerted just trying to get back on without success was apparently quite the spectacle.
You could just picture it.
It just goes to show that the allure of this new technology wasn't limited by one's physical prowess, though perhaps it should have been.
And it wasn't just clumsy attempts, though. By 1903, Zhang Garden was even hosting bicycle races, open to anyone for a small fee. That shows a real shift, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The bicycle was transitioning from a mere curiosity to something more integrated into social life. And moreover, it began to symbolize something much larger: westernization, civilization, and progress in China.
Oh.
This reflects a broader trend at the time of adopting Western technologies as a sign of advancement.
That's a significant leap in perception. How did that symbolic shift manifest itself in the sources you looked at?
We have some telling examples. One anecdote from the Game News in 1899 describes a farmer who, upon seeing bicycles in Shanghai, compared them to a water wheel used for irrigation.
Oh.
His conclusion was that the bicycle, with its seemingly simple yet effective mechanism, highlighted Chinese inferiority in invention. This reveals an early perception of Western technology as potentially surpassing Chinese innovation. It's a real moment of cultural reckoning.
That's a stark comparison, and it speaks volumes about the perceived technological gap at the time.
It does. And then there's the story of the modern school teacher who felt it was his duty to learn to ride a bicycle simply to set a progressive example for his students.
Really? Just had to do it.
It was seen as a necessary skill for someone representing modernity and progress. There was a real sense that embracing the bicycle was part of embracing the future.
It sounds like there was a real pressure to embrace this new technology as a symbol of moving forward. But it wasn't always smooth sailing, literally or figuratively, was it? We have that report of a young man taking a tumble.
Indeed. The 1898 Game News also reported on a young man who, while speeding along on his bicycle, ended up falling into a small river.
Oh dear.
These incidents, while perhaps cautionary, also indicate the growing presence of bicycles in daily life and the public's interest in even minor bicycle-related events. It shows that as the bicycle became more commonplace, so did the mishaps associated with it.
And it wasn't just men who were taking to two wheels, was it? Women in Shanghai also started to adopt the bicycle, albeit in different ways initially.
That's a fascinating aspect. Initially, courtesans in Shanghai began using bicycles as fashionable props in photographs. It was a way to project an image of being modern and, on trend. Later, women from wealthier families started riding them for personal use. We even have the lovely example of Sum Ailing, one of the famous Sum sisters, receiving a bicycle for her 10th birthday in 1899.
Wow.
This marked a significant step in the bicycle's acceptance among a wider segment of society and reflects changing social norms.
So from a novelty to a leisure activity to a symbol of progress and even a fashion statement. But the bicycle's role in Shanghai was about to become much more practical, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The year 1911 marks a crucial turning point in the story you've pieced together. That's when the Shanghai Postal Service purchased 100 bicycles for delivering mail.
100?
Yes. This was the first significant public use of the bicycle as a real mode of transport in Shanghai. It signaled a shift from recreational use to everyday utility.
From that point on, we see a real expansion of the bicycle's utility in the city.
Exactly. By the 1920s, various organizations in Shanghai, including telegraph and telephone companies, public utilities, and even the police force, were equipping their staff with bicycles to improve efficiency.
Makes sense.
The bicycle was becoming an indispensable tool for getting things done and keeping the city running.
And the statistics on bicycle ownership during this period really tell the story of this shift in practicality, don't they?
They do. Between 1927 and 1935, the number of bicycles in Shanghai surged dramatically, from just over 29,000 to more than 73,000.
That's a huge jump.
It is. And what's particularly striking is the rising per capita ownership, not just in the foreign concessions, but also among the Chinese population in the city. This demonstrates the bicycle's move from a luxury to a more accessible form of transport for a growing segment of society. With fuel shortages and damage to other forms of transport, bicycles became essential for navigating the city.
Right. No fuel needed.
Exactly. The bicycle wasn't just for personal transport anymore, it was a vital part of the city's logistical network, keeping businesses connected when other options were limited. And then, after the war, Shanghai experienced another boom in bicycle ownership due to the large influx of migrants needing affordable transportation.
So Shanghai's relationship with the bicycle went through these distinct phases. Initial wonder, adoption by the elite, and then a widespread embrace as a practical tool. It's fascinating to see this evolution within a single city. Now let's shift gears and look at the European experience. How does the history of cycling in cities like Paris and Amsterdam compare based on your research?
That's a crucial point of comparison for the story you're exploring. As one of your sources notes, social scientist Philippe Gaboriau identified 3 eras of the French bicycle: the bourgeois era, the mass era, and the environmental era.
Okay.
Similarly, Frederick Harthoff has examined how urban planning in Europe has adapted to accommodate bicycles. The long and established history of cycling in Europe provides a valuable context for understanding China's evolving bicycle culture. We can really see some interesting parallels and divergences.
And it hasn't been a linear progression in Europe either, has it? I remember reading about a sort of U-shaped curve in bicycle usage in some cities.
You're right. In many European cities, bicycle usage initially declined with the rise of the automobile. You know, the allure of personal freedom, speed, cars seemed like the future then.
Sure.
However, countries like Germany, Denmark, and especially the Netherlands have seen a significant resurgence in cycling. This was largely due to supportive transport and land use policies, things like prioritizing segregated bike lanes and traffic calming measures.
Real investment.
Real investment. In fact, cycling rates in Dutch cities can be as high as 30 to 50%. This reevaluation reflects growing environmental and health concerns among urban populations.
That's incredible. It's hard to imagine those kinds of numbers in many modern cities today. But the transition wasn't always smooth, was it? Tell us about the Amsterdam white bicycle experiment.
The white bicycle experiment of the 1960s in Amsterdam. It's a bit of a cautionary tale. The idea was to provide free, unlocked bicycles for public use, encouraging spontaneous cycling.
Sounds good in theory.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it was a complete failure. The bicycles were quickly lost, stolen, or vandalized, highlighting the challenges of shared mobility without a robust system in place. It really highlights that good intentions aren't always enough, doesn't it?
No system, no order.
Precisely. This contrasts sharply with the later success of more structured bike-sharing programs in Europe.
Which brings us to Paris and the Velib program. That seems like a much more systematic approach to integrating bicycles into the urban fabric.
Exactly. Launched in 2007, Velib aimed to make bicycles a key part of Paris's public transport network. The strategy was to create a high density of docking stations throughout the city, making it easy to pick up and drop off bikes.
Convenience is key.
Absolutely. And the pricing structure, with free use for the first half hour and increasing charges thereafter, was designed to encourage short trips and frequent turnover, essentially treating the bicycle as another form of public transit.
It sounds like a well-thought-out system. But Paris wasn't the first French city to experiment with bike sharing, was it?
No, you're right. Several other French cities, including Rennes, Bordeaux, and Lyon, had earlier, albeit smaller scale, bike sharing initiatives. These earlier experiments likely provided valuable lessons that informed the design of the larger Velib program. They could learn from the initial challenges.
Makes sense. And what about the Netherlands? You mentioned their high cycling rates. What factors contributed to that sustained success in creating a true cycling culture?
A key factor in the Dutch success story was the government's commitment to eco-friendly transport following the 1970s oil crisis. This led to significant and sustained investment in dedicated cycling infrastructure, things like segregated bike paths, bicycle bridges, ample parking facilities.
Really building it in.
Over decades, this consistent support has transformed Dutch cities into cycling havens, making it a safe and convenient option for a large portion of the population.
It seems clear that while the bicycle has a long history in both Europe and China, the paths to widespread adoption and integration have been quite different, shaped by unique urban contexts and societal priorities. So having seen this fascinating trajectory in both Shanghai and Europe, let's bring things up to the present day. We're seeing a global resurgence of cycling in recent years. What's driving this modern revival, and how does it connect to the historical trends we've discussed?
Well, several factors are at play in this modern resurgence. There's a growing awareness of the health benefits, obviously.
Sure.
And increasing concern about environmental issues like air pollution and climate change. For many, the bicycle offers a cleaner, quieter, and more active way to navigate urban environments.
Right.
There's also a desire for a different kind of urban experience, one that's less dominated by cars and more focused on, human scale mobility. This really echoes some of that initial fascination with the bicycle as a symbol of a better future.
And China has also experienced this recent bike boom, particularly in 2020. What were the specific circumstances there? Did they mirror what we saw elsewhere?
The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 created a unique situation in China. The emphasis on healthy distance and healthy shura, or healthy travel, led to a surge in demand for personal transportation that wasn't public.
Avoid the crowds.
Exactly. This provided an unexpected boost for Chinese bicycle manufacturers like Shanghai Phoenix and Zhonglu Corporation forever, who saw significant increases in production and exports. It's interesting how a global crisis could lead to a renewed interest in such a traditional mode of transport.
So a silver lining for the industry amidst the global crisis. But is this recent boom likely to be a long-term trend in China, given the rapid pace of urbanization and other transport options?
That's the key question, isn't it? While the pandemic provided a temporary upswing, the long-term trends of urbanization, the increasing popularity of e-bikes and public transport, and crucially, the rise of bike sharing, well, they suggest that this particular boom might be temporary for traditional bicycle retail. The urban landscape is constantly evolving.
Yes, bike sharing. That's been a major disruptor. It really took off in China around 2014, didn't it? How did that shift the landscape?
It did, and it had a significant impact on traditional bicycle retail. The sheer convenience and accessibility of dockless bike sharing, enabled by mobile payment and GPS technology, which allows for bike location and dockless systems, led to a sharp decline in sales for established manufacturers like Giant, as your sources indicate.
Wow.
The market dynamics shifted dramatically, with shared bikes becoming a ubiquitous sight in many Chinese cities.
It's interesting how the utilitarian bicycle, once the king of the road, has had to adapt to these new forms of mobility. But we're also seeing a growing demand for different types of bicycles, aren't we? Not just the basic ones.
Exactly. While basic transport remains a factor, there's a growing segment of the market that's interested in mid to high-end bicycles for recreation and sport. Factors like speed, off-road capabilities, stylish appearance, and overall quality are becoming increasingly important to consumers.
It's a lifestyle thing now.
It reflects a shift towards viewing cycling not just as a necessity, but also as a leisure pursuit and a lifestyle choice.
It almost echoes that New Yorker article we came across describing the late 19th century bicycle craze as a symbol of modernity, speed, freedom, the future, offering a sense of flying.
Yes.
That romanticism seems to be making a comeback in a different form.
It does. And when you consider the fundamental advantages, it's 4 times faster than walking, requires only 1/5 the effort, its enduring appeal becomes clear. It's also worth remembering that while initially expensive, the bicycle became the primary transport for the working class in 1950s Europe.
Right, it democratized travel.
Exactly, highlighting its adaptability across different economic strata and its potential to democratize mobility.
So where does Shanghai fit into this modern resurgence of cycling? We talked about the post-war boom, but what's the contemporary picture, considering bike sharing and everything else?
This brings us to the vision of people like Zhang Xingdong and his company 700 Bike. They're focusing on what they call urban bicycles as a new lifestyle category in China.
Okay.
They're drawing parallels with the evolution of fitness apparel, like Lululemon for bikes. They're marketing targets, trendsetters. They collaborate with lifestyle brands. It's about creating a new image for urban cycling style, personal expression.
It's about more than just getting from A to B. It's about the statement it makes. But we also have to acknowledge the practical challenges that still exist in Chinese cities, don't we?
Yeah.
Like bike theft and maintenance.
Absolutely. These are indeed persistent issues, and as the Amsterdam white bicycle experiment showed, they're not unique to China. Early public bicycle systems in Beijing also faced huge challenges with theft and upkeep. These practicalities can significantly impact the widespread adoption and sustained use of bicycles.
Which makes the rise of dockless bike-sharing companies like AFO and Mobike so interesting. They seem to offer a potential solution by making bikes readily available and trackable.
They did at first glance. By leveraging mobile payment and GPS technology, they overcame some of the key limitations of traditional dock systems. OFO, which started at Peking University, initially focused on repurposing existing bikes with simpler tech.
Cheaper, maybe.
Possibly. Whereas Mobike from Shanghai opted for custom-built, more robust bikes with integrated connectivity. This allowed for greater flexibility in where bikes could be picked up and dropped off. No docks needed.
And these companies attracted huge amounts of investment, didn't they? Highlighting the perceived potential.
Enormous capital flowed into both of OFO and Mobike in 2016. It was an intense competition to dominate the market. However, the long-term sustainability of this model, well, it's proven challenging, as we've seen in recent years, with issues around oversupply, vandalism, and operational costs.
Yeah, those piles of bikes.
Exactly.
It's a complex picture, with tradition meeting innovation and facing new sets of hurdles. Now let's delve a bit deeper into Shanghai's historical journey towards becoming a bicycle society. What specific role did urban development play in the bicycle's rise there, connecting back to how the city itself was changing?
Shanghai's rapid urbanization in the 20th century was a crucial factor. The increasing separation of residential, commercial, and industrial areas created a growing need for efficient personal transport options. People had to travel further.
Right.
The bicycle, with its speed and flexibility, was ideally suited to fill this gap, offering a way to navigate the expanding urban sprawl.
It makes sense. As cities expand, the need for independent mobility grows. And it wasn't just spatial changes, but also the changing rhythms of urban life, right? How did things like work schedules influence the bicycle's adoption?
Precisely. The development of more structured work schedules and commuting patterns in Shanghai created a daily ebb and flow of people across the city. Faster transport options, like the bicycle, became essential for navigating these new urban rhythms and ensuring people could get to work on time.
Couldn't rely on walking anymore.
Exactly. It provided a reliable and relatively quick way to cover distances that were becoming too far to walk easily. The bicycle became a key part of this new urban fabric.
And affordability was another key factor, wasn't it? As it became more accessible, more people could integrate it into their daily lives.
Absolutely. The falling prices of bicycles in Shanghai, particularly in the 1920s and 30s, made them accessible to a much wider segment of the population. This price reduction was driven by the growth of domestic manufacturing and the influx of cheaper Japanese imports.
Competition brings prices down.
It does, and it made bicycle ownership a realistic possibility for the burgeoning middle class.
Coupled with Shanghai's significant population growth during this period, you had a larger market with increasing purchasing power, creating a perfect storm for bicycle adoption.
Exactly. The rise of a middle class in Shanghai with growing disposable income meant that owning a bicycle became a realistic aspiration for many more people. It transitioned from an elite luxury to a more attainable everyday item, further solidifying its role.
So the bicycle found its niche due to urban expansion, changing lifestyles, and increasing affordability. But how did it stack up against other modes of transport available in Shanghai at the time? What were its unique advantages?
That's an important comparison. When you look at rickshaws, for example, they offered similar advantages in terms of convenience, speed, maybe adaptability. However, rickshaws were increasingly seen as inhumane.
Yeah, the labor involved.
And they had limitations in carrying capacity and added to congestion. The bicycle, notably nicknamed the Freedom Car, offered personal agency without those ethical concerns. It put the individual in control.
And against the more modern options that were emerging, like electric trams and buses.
Well, trams and buses offered speed and higher capacity, sure, but they were limited by fixed routes and the need for better road conditions.
Not everywhere had good roads.
Exactly. In many parts of Shanghai, the bicycle's ability to navigate various road surfaces and squeeze through congested areas gave it a significant advantage in flexibility and accessibility. Plus, its independence from fuel and electricity became a critical asset, particularly during wartime shortages.
You can always rely on pedal power. And we can't forget the bicycle's utility for carrying goods, both for individuals and businesses. It wasn't just about people getting around.
Right. From delivering newspapers to transporting small merchandise, the bicycle proved to be a versatile workhorse, enhancing the efficiency of various urban activities and becoming an integral part of the city's economic engine.
Okay, so as the number of bicycles on the streets of Shanghai exploded, managing this two-wheeled influx must have become a significant challenge for city authorities. How did they grapple with regulating bicycle use?
It certainly did. As bicycle popularity grew, so did the need for regulations and order. We see an evolution of bicycle management in Shanghai, starting with pretty early restrictions in public parks aimed at protecting the gardens from damage by cyclists.
Keep off the grass.
Pretty much. Then we see the introduction of more formal measures like bicycle licenses and taxes in the 1920s. This signals a more serious attempt to manage their presence.
And generate revenue.
Yes. The public concession authorities began levying a bicycle tax, or which surprisingly became a significant source of revenue for their municipal administration. Later, regulations became even more detailed.
Like what?
Including thorough inspection requirements, checking for broken frames, wheel integrity, brake function, even the loudness of the bell. There were also fines for violations, indicating a growing awareness of safety and the need for accountability.
It sounds like they were taking bicycle regulation quite seriously as their numbers swelled. And as motorized vehicles became more common, traffic management had to evolve to accommodate this mix, right?
Absolutely. The increasing number of both bicycles and automobiles necessitated the development of traffic management rules. This included implementing traffic lights and specific regulations for cyclists, things like needing a bell, lights at night, no riding on sidewalks, reducing speed at intersections and near schools or hospitals. It was about creating a system where different modes could coexist, hopefully safely.
And then there was the persistent issue of bicycle theft, which, as we noted, is a global challenge.
Shanghai developed its own approach to tackling this, didn't it?
They did. Efforts to combat bicycle theft culminated in the establishment of official bicycle parking stations in 1946. These roughly Shanghai public bicycle parking stations were managed by a private company under government authorization.
Okay.
And they were strategically set up at various busy public places: theaters, dance halls, parks, banks, restaurants, places that people would leave their bikes for a while.
It sounds like a comprehensive network aimed at providing a secure solution. And there were specific rules for using these stations.
Yes. A system of tickets, payment per 3-hour block, and procedures for lost tickets were put in place. The aim was clear: provide secure parking, reduce theft, and bring some order to the often chaotic scene of bicycles parked haphazardly around the city.
Makes sense.
This really highlights the city's efforts to integrate the bicycle into its infrastructure and address the very real challenges that came with its popularity. It's fascinating to see how Shanghai grappled with the integration of the bicycle and that initial curiosity to this complex system of regulation and management. It really mirrors the journey in many other cities, like Paris and Amsterdam, albeit with its own unique cultural and historical twists.
Indeed. The bicycle's journey, as we've seen in Paris, Amsterdam, and Shanghai, is a compelling story. It's about technological adoption, societal adaptation, and the constant interplay between a simple machine and the ever-evolving urban landscape. Each city tells a slightly different but ultimately connected story.
So what are the key themes that tie these international experiences together as we bring this deep dive to a close?
Yeah.
What are those aha moments we should be holding on to?
First, that initial wonder and almost mythical perception of the bicycle, especially in Shanghai, but echoed elsewhere with new tech. That's a fascinating start. Then there's its swift adoption, not just as transport, but as a powerful symbol of modernity and progress across cultures. We can't overlook its crucial role as a practical means of transport, especially during rapid urban change or crisis like wartime, a role it played in all three cities in different ways.
Right.
And finally, the diverse ways cities, from Paris to Shanghai, have attempted to integrate and regulate this popular mode of transport offer valuable insights into urban planning and management that are still relevant today.
And for you, our listener, the history of the bicycle, seen through these different international lenses, provides such a fascinating way to understand the dynamic relationship between technology, urban development, and human behavior across different cultures and times. It's not just about the bike itself, right? It's about how this simple invention got woven into the fabric of urban life.
Which raises an important question to leave you with. Considering the ongoing challenges of urban mobility and sustainability that cities everywhere face, what future role might the bicycle play? What valuable lessons can we learn from its diverse history in places like Paris, Amsterdam, and Shanghai as we pedal towards that future? Think about how these historical patterns of adoption, adaptation, and regulation might just inform the next chapter of urban cycling in our own cities.
Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this two-wheel adventure across continents and time. Keep those wheels turning.